How could it be justice if more money gives you a more quality experience at it? That seems to go against the very principle of justice in and of itself. Justice coming from the word just. In order for something to be justice, it has to be just. Just meaning it's right, it's morally correct, it's fair. And is something morally correct, fair, right about the idea that wealthier people are better able to escape punishment while poorer people get exactly what is due to them by the justice system? The justice system seems to only know what is fair for people to get when they're poorer. And this is coming from a recent acquittal, a recent throwing out of a case in Trinidad and Tobago. One of the corruption charges, cases coming from the Piarco airport scandal. An airport was built in Trinidad and Tobago some 20-something years ago. The government that built the airport was embroiled in corruption, so several government ministers and officials had some charges, and then people surrounding these ministers, the businessmen, their financiers, etc., they had their own charges. Now, the thing with many of these charges is it's not really a question of if it was done. It's more of a question of what do we charge them with? How do we get the evidence for it? Because there are people who admitted guilt and have already faced the consequences in the United States. Their justice system seems a bit faster than ours. So some people already went through the process over there. Some of the businessmen in Trinidad and Tobago have to go through that process still in the United States, and they're fighting tooth and nail to prevent extradition to go face that process over there. So there's that. But one of the cases, because there are many cases surrounding this corruption issue, one of the cases recently has been discontinued by our DPP, and he had reasoning for this. He gave several reasons for it, and the reasons kind of make some sense. You know, if you're trying to think about this reasonably, his reasonings add up a bit, and the sum that it makes after you add up his reasoning is that it's very difficult to get justice when people are wealthy and connected. But we'll dive into that. Before we dive into those articles, if you haven't hit that like button yet, make sure you smash it. Hit it very, very hard, very hard. Make sure that like button feels your presence. If you have something to say, drop a comment. Subscribe if you are not yet subscribed. Now would be a good time to do so. And let's dive into this article. DPP discontinues Piarco case against Bastio Pandey, Omar Ish Galbaransing, Carlos John. Director of Public Prosecutions Roger Gaspard SC has withdrawn the decades-old corruption charges against former Prime Minister Bastio Pandey, his wife Omar, former Government Minister Carlos John, and businessman Ishwar Galbaransing. This latest development took place on Monday when the matter was expected to go to trial. Gaspard admitted anticipating the prosecution would have faced a real difficulty in achieving a fair prospect of conviction if the trial proceeded. Now, I heard an interview with him, and he was explaining some of this. And the idea here he was trying to express is that the office of the DPP isn't just there to prosecute people. Their idea is, well, it's there to prosecute people, but it isn't the sole purpose of their office isn't just to blindly seek conviction. So as long as there's a case in the court, the DPP's office is going to chase down that conviction. Well, that's not exactly what the DPP's office is there for. They are there actually to decide if a case seems like there isn't a reasonable chance of victory on the side of the state, on the side of the DPP. Well, then the DPP's job is actually not to prosecute, to pull back from prosecution. And he was trying to highlight this point. His job isn't just prosecuting, it's making those decisions. And he said this decision was best here. Looking at the case going forward, it seemed like there wasn't a high possibility that they could have won this case. Now, the state's throwing in of the towel came on the same day the multi-million-dollar forfeiture jury trial against several of the Piarco defendants started in a Miami court. So another case is now starting in Miami. As he addressed the court, Gaspard admitted the inquiry involving the four was of some antiquity. The Pandays were charged with corruptly receiving money, while John and Galbaransing were charged with corruptly giving £25,000 to the couple. John and Gal Branson were accused of giving Pandy money as an inducement or reward in the relation to the Piakwe Airport expansion project. They were all charged in 2005. Gaspard said, I have looked at these proceedings and am of the view that having regard to the fact that several of our key witnesses have now become unavailable, and bearing in mind, my lady, my guiding yardsticks, those being whether or not in the circumstances to prosecute this matter or in the prosecution of this matter there will be a fair prospect of conviction, and whether to prosecute this matter, if on the evidence there is a fair prospect of conviction such that prosecution will be in the public interest, I have decided to go no further with this matter. Some witnesses dead. Attorneys for the four had written to the DPP asking for reasons to continue the prosecutions. In explaining his reasons for discontinuing the case, Gaspard said he considered the fact that some key witnesses have since died, and another particular witness is now an elderly person living abroad who could not easily be found. In the circumstances, my lady, I was not unmindful also of the prospect of the applicants having a fair argument on the basis of presumed or presumptive prejudice, and I suspect specific prejudice. I mentioned these two factors as to indicate that the decision would have been based on the consideration of the matter in the round. Suffice it to say, in the circumstances, I anticipate the prosecution will have real difficulty surmounting the first hurdle, that is whether or not in the circumstances to continue with this prosecution there is a fair prospect of conviction. He's repeating the same thing basically over and over there. There doesn't seem to be a fair prospect of conviction. If the DPP goes ahead with this case, if they go ahead prosecuting this case, they do not believe that they're going to win the case, generally speaking, on the balance of probabilities. They don't think they're going to win this case and get a conviction on this case. And in that case, it kind of makes sense. Would it make sense then that we're demanding the DPP goes through the process, goes through all of the court process, and then still loses the case in the long run, costing the state millions of dollars in the process? Or would it make more sense from the moment the DPP recognizes this case is basically unwinnable now, well, we'll draw back from this case, we will not go forward with this? The thing to me, the main issue here isn't necessarily whether the DPP pulls out of the case or not, because according to his reasoning, that kind of makes sense. And he is a prosecutor, the man with the experience and the man with the job. I would suppose he has a fair idea of the prospect of conviction and on prosecution of a matter. And if he is saying that he doesn't believe they will win this, I will take his word on it. The problem here is how has this gotten to a point where the facts surrounding the issue are of this nature? The facts surrounding the issue are of the nature where we had witnesses, but the witnesses are now dead. We had a witness, but the witness has now been in the wind and is an elderly person and they're difficult to find. How did we reach that point? And in the interview I was listening an interview with the DPP, and he was explaining some of this. And the plain reality is the fact of how we reached to this point is basically one thing: time. The reason we are at the point where these are now the facts of the situation and it doesn't seem like there's a reasonable prospect of winning, so they have to throw out the case. The general reasoning for that is time, the main point. The case took time, and as the case took time, that's how we ended up in this situation here. The case took long enough for some witnesses to die out, for some witnesses to disappear. Why did the case take so long? Okay, our justice system is slow and sticky in the first place, but it's not just that. The DPP was mentioning that in these cases, all of the peripheral matters, all the matters surrounding the case also need to be heard, and all of those matters may need to be heard right up to the level of the Privy Council. Before the case could even start, all of the peripheral issues have to be ventilated, and That's the problem when you're dealing with people with money. Someone with money is going to have, they're going to get the best lawyers, and they're going to have the money to employ that lawyer consistently round the clock for years. And here's what they will do. They will nitpick at every single particular specific of this court case, and they will raise an issue with it and go through the courts with that issue and attempt to go up till the level of Privy Council with that issue. And the reality is that just in the matter of procedure, just in the matter of things take one thing having to happen before the other thing happens, it's going to take time. So let's say the DPP is trying to prosecute me on matter X, but I'm going to sue on 10 different issues surrounding matter X, and each of those 10 issues have to reach the Privy Council, and for every issue to reach the Privy Council, it might take 6, 7 to 10 months or around there, even a year sometimes or more. Okay, now 10 issues reaching the Privy Council, you're seeing the kind of time that is going to be racking up, the kind of time that you're going to be racking up as all of this goes through, as the procedures go through. And that's exactly what happens. The DPP was pointing out that many of these peripheral issues, many of these secondary issues that they took to court before the main substantial issue could be heard, most of these issues they lost. But that doesn't matter. Whether you lose it or not, the time is gone. The time is gone. They were not paying necessarily to win those cases. They were paying for the time. Similarly, we have right now a former government minister who is wanted by the United States, but he somehow has gotten the ability, same thing, to stick up the court system with issue after issue after issue to prevent even the hearing to go forward before they could hear if they should take him to the United States. And that's the whole thing with money in this system. The whole thing with money in the court system, to me, it throws out the entire idea of justice. If I, as a more wealthy person, could pay for a King's Counsel, and if someone is poor, they have to get a public defender who is overworked, overstretched, and doesn't really care about your issue personally, well, who you think is going to get the better chance of justice? And if that's the case, how is this a just system? The justice system is not a just system, just by the way. And the DPP was pointing out that not just the reality of dragging these cases out to the Privy Council would have been the issue, but also his office is handicapped. There are more courts right now than there are prosecutors. Justice system could collapse, says Gaspard. If the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions does not receive additional staff soon, then it could lead to an inevitable collapse of the criminal justice system. DPP Roger Gaspard, senior counsel, yesterday stressed the shortfall of his office in prosecuting matters and called for the appointment of additional attorneys to his office. For the DPP's office to effectively operate, Gaspard said there was need for approximately 129 attorneys, but there are only 58 prosecutors. Speaking during an interview on I-95, he said, "I would describe the problem as acute and chronic. It is very critical where anytime you reach a stage where the number of courts outnumber the number of prosecutors, that must be an area of concern. The average prosecutor has over 120 files. So in the context of meeting deadlines, as outlined by magistrates and judges as they carry out their functions, it is extremely challenging. And I have said years ago that if the situation continues, the criminal justice system will collapse. I have said that publicly, and I have said it in a joint select committee. I have been saying it." He was pointing out that this is an issue that has been ongoing for years. They have been making this complaint over and over and over and over again, and it seems like it's falling on deaf ears. No one attempts to really cure the issues inside of the DPP's office. And he's saying that the problem there is he himself, the Director of Public Prosecutions. He isn't in control of hiring his staff. That's not up to him. There are two different ways staff lawyers can get into the DPP's office. As the State Counsel, going through, I believe that's the JLSC, the Judicial and Legal Services Commission. So their job is to go out there, and all of the new fresh lawyers that are popping up out of law school on a yearly basis, because we do have a lot of lawyers. The DPP are speaking about that. I have no control over the appointment of staff to the DPP's office. Sometimes people will ask me why I do not hire persons coming out of law school. Well, guess what? I do not hire persons. That is the function of the Judicial and Legal Service Commission. And he's saying it's not only even up to them. There's a side where you could enter through contract, and he isn't even in charge of the contractual end of it. That's on the side of the CPO and the Attorney General. And he was pointing out that really and truly, he doesn't think it makes sense to even get the contract side workers. You don't want lawyers in charge of prosecuting matters in our justice system that are beholden to the office of the Attorney General for their contracts. That doesn't make sense, really and truly. You want an independent office out of the DPP. That's why you have separated it from the Attorney General office in the first place. So these two streams, one the contract side, one the JLSC with the state attorneys, state councils, he isn't in control of either one of them. He's saying he doesn't really think that the contract lawyers make sense, but he doesn't even get those. He has the 58 he has currently, while he needs 129. So if we don't have enough prosecutors to prosecute the matters, obviously the matters are going to be even more delayed. And what would be the quality of work if these prosecutors are so overworked? The chances are high that their quality of work is going to be sacrificed in order to stretch to the amount of work they have to do. In order to stretch to the quantity of work, their quality of work seems like, very likely it will take a hit. It may take a little suffering. But tell me what you think. That's all I have for now. Is this justice system really just if I could pay more money and get a better experience out of it? Does that make sense as a justice system, or is it really just as nearly any other thing in this whole world? Those who have more money can get a better experience out of it, and yet still we stand here and pretend like this justice system is what really holds this country together, making sure things are dealt with fairly. Is it? That's all I have for now. I hope you're educated, informed, or entertained, and I will see you in the next video.